You ever hear the saying, don't mess with Texas? Well, turns out you really shouldn't mess with Texas water. My name's Daniel Carter, and let me tell you how a pack of suit and tie busybodies with more money than sense tried to choke out Carter Creek, my family's lifeblood, just to boost their property values, and how Mother Nature turned around and made them pay for every arrogant drop. See, Carter Creek isn't just a trickle running through some anonymous patch of East Texas. It's named after my great-granddad, Henry Carter, a man who showed up here over 100 years ago with nothing but calluses, grit, and a stubborn streak you could pave a road with. He built our first cabin, planted those giant post oaks, taught his sons to respect the land and the water that cut through it. I grew up out there with my cousins, chasing frogs and skipping rocks, watching the creek swell in the spring and thin out in the August heat, and listening to Grandpa say, that creek doesn't just run through the land, son. It runs through us. So by the time the place was mine, I felt like the caretaker of something way bigger than a piece of land. I was responsible for 40 acres, a quilt of pasture and woods, the creek slicing through it silver and alive, always humming in the background. It was peaceful at least until the developers showed up. You know how it goes, bulldozers, fake promises, and a bunch of luxury homes that looked like something out of a magazine but sounded like a motel when the wind hit them just right. They called it Pinterest Estates, swanky names for each house. The Hawthorne Villa del Sol, granite countertops, imported tile, and 6 bathrooms per home for families of 4, mind you. Those folks rolled in with golf carts and glossy flyers, and pretty soon where wildflowers used to grow, you had SUVs lined up like parade floats. I figured, hey, live and let live. I kept my distance, figured they'd keep theirs. Nope. That lasted, 3 months? Then the letters started, official letterhead fancy seals, you name it. Complaints the creek was too loud, the frogs kept them up at night. Mosquitoes were invading their patios, and my favorite, it was hurting their property values. Now I've heard some whoppers, but blaming a 100-year-old creek for your soggy begonias, that's a new one. I tried to be neighborly, invited them out to see how the ecosystem worked, how the creek kept the deer, the herons, the native wildflowers all thriving. They weren't interested in understanding. They wanted control, plain and simple. Next thing I know, one sticky June morning, I'm yanked out of bed by the sound of engines. Not just 1 or 2, a whole circus of construction vehicles at the southern bend of Carter Creek. Backhoes, cement trucks, guys in vests and hard hats moving around like they're building a highway. I sprint down there, boots untied, yelling before I even know what's happening, and get stopped by a site supervisor with a clipboard. He tells me, we've got permission from the county, sir. And right then up rolls this SUV, spotless tires, barely dusty, and out steps Richard Holloway, HOA president. If you ever wondered what a smug grin looks like in real life, it's him with that courtroom-ready face and the handshake of a man who's never planted a thing in his life. Daniel, he says real slow, like I'm hard of hearing, this is for the greater good. The county signed off. He flashes a stack of papers all stamped and signed, or so it looks at first glance. You should have maintained your land better. We filed this as a nuisance mitigation. Nuisance. That word rattled around in my head. It was a creek, for God's sake. I called the county in a rage. Turns out the permit was based on environmental concerns. They claimed Carter Creek was stagnant, a health hazard, a breeding ground for West Nile. All kinds of nonsense. The proof. Forged reports, bogus signatures, the works. HOA hadn't just bent the truth, they snapped it in half and tossed it in the trash. I drove straight into town and found Lena Morales, a land and water rights lawyer with a reputation for scaring the hell out of developers. She flips through the paperwork, slams it shut, looks me in the eye and says, what they did isn't just illegal, it's arrogant and stupid. But she's honest too, tells me litigation could take years, and by then the creek would be long gone, buried under concrete and invoices. I'll admit, I was about as low as I've ever felt, angry, powerless, just standing there by the old oak watching the concrete dry in the creek bed. That night, with rain in the air and thunder in the distance, I walked the property line thinking about something Grandpa Carter used to say, sun water always finds its way. I could almost feel the land bracing itself like an old hound before a storm. July came bringing more rain than we'd seen in years. First a little, then a lot. The creek, forced underground by that brand new concrete channel, started to back up, pressure building with nowhere to go. I barely slept walking the perimeter with a flashlight, listening for trouble. And then at 2:43 a.m., I heard it, Not a trickle, but a roar, deep and wild, the kind of sound you feel in your bones before your brain catches up. The southern bend burst water shooting over the top, breaking free, rolling downhill like it had been set loose from a cage. Within minutes, Pinterest Estates was underwater. Emergency calls went out, water in the garages, up the driveways, flooding living rooms and soaking drywall. By sunrise, you'd have thought someone had dropped Venice in the middle of Texas, 6 feet of water in some places, floating patio furniture, alarms blaring, neighbors wading waist-deep in their designer jeans, yelling at contractors who looked like they'd seen a ghost. Now here's where it gets real good. The HOA tried to blame me, said I'd rerouted the creek on purpose, which the county quickly saw through when the environmental folks started poking around. Turns out you can't block an ancient drainage system with concrete and expect the water to politely stay put. The environmental reports came in, and man, they were brutal: destroyed habitats, broken hydrology, multiple violations of state and federal law. The county demanded immediate removal of the concrete, full restoration, plus fines that would make a hedge fund manager sweat. But the damage was done. Those luxury homes waterlogged, moldy, with cracked foundations and ruined insulation. Insurance companies refused to pay a cent, citing man-made disaster. Home values tanked. Richard Holloway's mansion, the pride of Pinterest Estates, was now the neighborhood's first bona fide lake house, with every heavy rain refilling his fancy wine cellar to the brim. The news media had a field day. HOA drowns own neighborhood, concrete catastrophe, Texas. Karma flows downstream. The county, the state, and just about everyone else came knocking with lawsuits and investigations. And here's your twist. 2 months later, the real estate vultures swooped in. Some homeowners tried to tough it out, rebuilding with pumps and sandbags, but most just packed up and left selling at a loss. I bought 2 of those properties myself out of spite. An opportunity turned one into a little nature center for local kids and planted wildflowers on the other. Carter Creek, stubborn as ever, healed itself over time. Conservation groups came out, volunteers showed up, and slowly the land bounced back. Frogs returned, deer came down to drink again, and the old oak stood tall over it all. 5 years on, I'm still here, waking up to the sound of water, coffee on the porch, watching the mist lift off the creek each morning, grateful and a little smug. You know, the land remembered what it was before fences and HOA rules. No matter how much concrete they poured, they couldn't change its mind, couldn't bully it into silence. Water remembers. Nature remembers. The people who forgot that, well, they paid for it, every last one. So if you're ever tempted to pave over a creek for the sake of your property value, or if you think you can bully a family off land they bled for, remember, water always finds its way home, and sometimes it brings a little Texas justice with it. What do you think? Was that karma or just plain physics? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if you've ever seen a feud between man and nature play out this wild, I want to hear your story too. Hit subscribe if you want more, and remember, you can't outsmart Mother Nature, but you sure can try.